Here's what's coming today on the Woodworking Network podcast.
I always say, if one person tries to do 20 things, they're going to do a mediocre. But if you have 20 people each doing one thing and doing it well and sharing it, boy, we could have, some really great work.
Welcome to the 5th season of the Woodworking Network podcast and a new episode. Join us as we explore the business of woodworking, big and small, and what it takes to succeed. I'm Will Sampson. Today's episode is sponsored by FDMC Magazine. Today our guest is Patrick Molzahn, who just retired as director of the cabinet making and millwork program at Madison College in Wisconsin. But first I want to talk about what have you learned today? We talk a lot about training and education in the woodworking industry, especially in light of everyone constantly complaining about not being able to find skilled workers. In that context, training and education seem like a one-way street with information flowing from the experts to the novices. But I think the other direction is just as important. If experienced people in the industry don't continue to learn throughout their career, not only will they be left behind by technology, but also they will have increasingly less to pass on to the next generation of woodworkers. There's a buzz phrase in the education establishment about creating lifetime learners, but in practice it's more talk than action. Since the public education system is predominantly built on regurgitating information to earn a grade on a test and move on, the joy and intrinsic value of learning becomes an accidental side effect, if it happens at all. There's very little in established training programs that is not targeted at specific outcomes. If you don't come up with the answer that achieves that pre-planned outcome, the buzzer sounds and you lose. There's little room for serendipitous discoveries, for achieving more than was expected, or for taking an exciting detour down a path of unprogrammed learning. I get that there needs to be some structure in most learning to achieve a higher percentage of positive outcomes. But I think a lot of our learning takes the excitement and the treasure hunt, if you will, out of the education. The thrill of discovery is a powerful tool to promote more learning. But if discovery is limited to finding only the right answers, much of that power is gone. YouTube is a great example of the power of education not directed at a specific outcome. Oh, sure, if I need to find out information to do a specific project, I'll likely be able to find it pretty fast. But the chances of me being attracted to some entirely unrelated learning paths are very high. Now, maybe all those detours are not entirely or immediately productive. My wife considers me a font of never-ending supply of useless, in her eyes, and trivial to her information that fills up my brain and keeps me from remembering important things, like, what was I supposed to get at the store? But the excitement of learning something, anything, new, usually leads to seeking more knowledge. That leads to unexpected results that expand horizons and can conceivably enrich everyone around you. I have a number of friends who are focused on improving business efficiency. They are all true lifetime learners who are always looking for new information and re-examining their own long-held beliefs. Very little stands still in their world. They can be occasionally irritating for the people around them, but everyone in their orbit learns to travel a little faster. When you are focused on learning new things, you become adept at creating new things. It's the entrepreneurship of ideas, and it's what powers the future. What have you learned today? Did you share it? I want to get to our interview with Patrick Molzahn, but first let's pause for a word from our sponsor. FDMC Magazine is your vital source of information to improve your woodworking business. Whether it's keeping you apprised of the latest advances in manufacturing, helping you solve your wood technology problems with Gene Wengert, or inspiring you with case histories about successful businesses and best practices, FDMC Magazine is there to be the sharpest business tool in your shop. Learn more and subscribe for free at woodworkingnetwork.com/FDMC. Now let's get to our interview with Patrick Molzahn. Today our guest is Patrick Molzahn, who just retired as director of the cabinet making and millwork program at Madison College in Wisconsin. He was a founding board member of the Woodworking Career Alliance and the first person to earn the Diamond Credential, which is WCA's highest standard in woodworking skills. He's also responsible for the recently released 6th edition of the book Modern Cabinet Making. Welcome to the Woodworking Network podcast, Patrick.
Thanks, Will. Good to be here.
First, let's talk a little bit about the book. I still am amazed about the book. It has to be one of the crowning achievements of your career. How extensively is that used as a textbook in woodworking education programs?
Well, I like to call it the last good book available. All of the great resources have kind of been gone by the wayside. It really is the main textbook that's out there. And, I can tell you sales are good on it. It's used throughout North America, Canada. A lot of their programs are using it. So it's a very good resource.
Well, that's great. I think it's amazing. I learned a lot going through it myself. I think, I was talking about that with somebody the other day. It's, if you stop learning, you stop growing, and there's always something more to learn.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, we've been talking about the challenge of hiring skilled workers in the woodworking industry for at least 30 years. There have been all sorts of programs, and you've been involved in many of them. Small positive gains seem to get achieved, but the overall problem remains. From what your perspective, what's going on?
Boy, it's a real challenge, and it comes at all ends. I really think we need a national curriculum, some guidance there, and build upon that. The absence of apprenticeship, I think, is the saddest thing. It's largely disappeared. I ran a 1-year program, which basically distilled a 4-year apprenticeship into 1 year. I used to tell my students it's like drinking from a fire hose. It was not the ideal way to train. There's nothing like having that time on task, being in the workplace, and practicing the theory that you learn in school. So I really would like to see some sort of apprenticeship come back in some form. I think the WCA is offering that opportunity with their new online training modules, making it available anywhere. We have great resources, the technology, the ability to reach an audience, the ability, I'm a big lover of video. I did my first videos back in 2004 when the digital technology was just starting. And the beauty of that is you can watch a demonstration multiple times until you get it. So the tools are there. It's just a matter of getting everybody on board and using them.
Yeah, well, somebody was talking the other day that we talk about a woodworking industry, but really it's fragmented. There's architectural millworkers, there's cabinet shops, there's the closet industry, there's all sorts of different kinds of custom furniture, different segments that really don't interact with each other, even though the skills and the requirements for employees are pretty similar across those ranges.
Yeah, that's very well said. And, that is also something we addressed as the Woodwork Career Alliance is, we weren't going to set or mandate a curriculum, but we were going to set up the skills, and it's kind of a la carte. You can pick and choose what meets the needs for your industry. But yeah, getting everybody on the same page is a real challenge.
Yeah, well, and you talked about calling for some kind of a national curriculum. I know the new National Woods Board. That's sort of what their tack is that they've tried to do is develop a curriculum and share it. How do you think that's going to work? Is that going to be a big help, or is
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, the key word there is sharing, right? And it's something that I've been a big believer in. There's a lot of people out there, educators doing great things, but they're doing them in their own little silo. Back in the days, and you and I have been around long enough to remember Woodlinks. And one of the things that
yep,
I did back in the early 2000s was share my curriculum with Woodlinks in the hopes of getting it out there. And I had a selfish interest that I wanted feedback and I wanted to make my curriculum better. I always say, if one person tries to do 20 things, they're going to do a mediocre. But if you have 20 people each doing one thing and doing it well and sharing it, boy, we could have, some really great work. And, so that's what I pushed. I shared my curriculum with Woodlinks. I shared it with WCA in the hopes that those resources would come back to me better through feedback, but also benefit the industry. And that's where I think we need to go. The National Woods Board, I think that's a step in the right direction. I'm not real in on their day-to-day activities, but I do think that coming to some clear understanding of national standards, how to do things, and then disseminating that so people aren't reinventing the wheel is what we need to move our industry forward.
yeah, there's just so many pieces of the puzzle to deal with. What do you think the most important thing is that makes woodworking career education work? Is it an enthusiastic teacher? Is it industry support? Is it institutional support? What, or all of the above?
Well, if it's going to succeed, if our education system's going to succeed, it needs to have a partner with industry. It needs to be relevant to industry. So, that voice is hugely important. And that takes time. It takes businesses willing to spend time, whether it's with your local high school, whether it's getting on board with, a national initiative like the National Woods Board, or getting involved with WCA. It's critical. Otherwise, there's a lot of great resources out there. Fine Woodworking has been an incredible resource through the years. I mean, I grew up starting in the 70s without any resources. And then when Fine Woodworking came on board, but that's largely relegated to the hobby sector. Okay. And there's great material and I access it, all the time. But if it's going to be relevant for employment and for our industry, it's critical that the business sector gets on board in the dialogue, provides feedback, and takes advantage of these resources.
Yeah, one of my concerns has always been, that so much of this industry is founded on small entrepreneurial businesses. And, it's so much of the education's founded on basic woodworking skills, but there is not, in my mind, enough devoted to business skills. And, if a guy is going to leave a school education program and then go work for a company, that's one thing. But the goals of a lot of these people is to try and start off on their own right away, which, maybe they ought to work for somebody for a while to learn something before they start their own business. But that's another talk for another day. I just wish that there was a broader view. And I think that employees that understand business principles are better employees too.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. And that's where I go back to the apprenticeship model, which, embraced that as part of apprenticeship training. Those are all topics that were covered in the curriculum. And, that's largely been lost. And, years ago, probably 15 years ago, I had a delegation from Russia come in. And when the Soviet Union disbanded, they got rid of all their training. And 20 years later, 25 years, 20 years later, they were trying to reestablish woodwork training in Russia, and how expensive and time consuming, and what a loss of knowledge had been lost in that time. And that's what I fear is, we're in danger of here in our economy is, if we don't nurture this information and carry it on. And that's why I was so grateful with my publisher, to carry on modern cabinet making. And they're very committed to continuing to publish that book. As I said, a lot of other texts, have gone by the wayside. And thankfully, that resource continues to survive and will survive for many years to come.
Yeah, it's just so complicated. I think, some of the lower echelon support has sort of gone away and poisoned the well, so to speak, with all of the schools that have done away, woodworking programs in middle schools and high schools. Kids don't get even a taste to know that there's something out there. And sometimes the taste they get is antiquated and not very realistic. And then you talk about industry support. I mean, one of the worst stories I ever had to report on, I remember some years ago in North Carolina, there was a very active cabinet shop, CNC-oriented cabinet shop, that partnered with a school program that had some 80 kids in the program, and mostly underprivileged kids. And they were looking at making careers out of this. And he was providing materials and technology, and he was negotiating with companies to get them their own CNC and things like that, and tours of his shop, and really working closely with them. And what did the school district do to thank that support? They decided to do away with the program and replace it with a culinary education program so that they could train these kids for minimum wage jobs in food services.
Yeah. And that goes back to, people say, where do we start? Being involved locally with your school board and advocating for these. If you're a business owner, get involved. I was speaking at the executive briefing conference a couple of years ago, and I had a conversation with a gentleman, and he was complaining, geez, I can't find any workers. And I said, well, do you have a high school in your area? He's like, yeah, I have one, right down the street from my shop. I said, hey, do you know the shop teacher? No. Have you gone over there? Take some time, get to know them. Chances are you have a lot of cutoffs that, you're throwing in the garbage that school could probably use. So just those little acts can really open up doors and really help, on both ends.
There's an awful lot of people in this industry, unfortunately, who are looking for someone else to solve this problem for them. And I think we have to take responsibility ourselves to find people and train people and work with people and create those connections. Somebody is not going to do it for us. The National Woods Board is a great venture, but I can't sit around and wait for them to provide guys for my shop.
Absolutely. And you mentioned earlier, and I saw this a lot. There's a lot of our industry is made up of a lot of small shops, and trying to get that training and resources for their employees. The putting centers around the country is not going to help them because, they're located in the middle of nowhere. They don't have access to that. And that's why I am excited, with the WCA, which, you mentioned the textbook, and certainly that was a crowning achievement of, my time and education. But my work with the WCA board is also something I am very grateful for, the people I worked with. And, we had really a threefold mission. The first is, what are the standards? How do we measure competency on any machine? And so we took 3 years to develop that. Then it was create a credentialing system. How do we recognize woodworkers for their achievements? Did a great job with that. The missing link was always the education part of it. We had resources. I had dedicated a lot of resources, but putting that into an online curriculum, and that's the great work that's being done right now. My good friend Greg Larson, out in Massachusetts, is working on that, and any shop anywhere. If you're in the middle of Iowa or wherever, you can access this material online. So what a great resource for your employees.
Well, and also I think that the beauty of that system with the passport system that they created creates a portable standard so that people can take their achievement with them wherever they go, and that can be recognized. And a lot of people in the industry still don't know about that. And the adoption rate is, I'm sure, far below what everyone in WCA had hoped for. But we, hope. And I know they're involved with the Woods Board and things like that too. Hopefully we can get these things pumped up. But it's frustrating because of the very slow gains that get made.
I agree, and that it's a problem in our industry where there's this fear. What if I train them, and all of a sudden they leave on me, right? And it's a short-sighted. I understand that from a business owner's perspective, but it's very short-sighted. And we created a tagline and said, what if I train them and they leave? Well, what if you don't train them and they stay, right? How
Yeah,
much is
exactly.
an untrained worker costing you? So I think that mindset really needs to flip in industry and not be fearful of training them for fear you're going to lose them, but looking at the advantage of.
Well, it's a very selfish attitude. I mean, if you train somebody, you have added value not just to your shop and your business, but you've added value to the whole industry because you've created somebody who knows how to do something that wherever they go is going to have those skills. And, the idea of, I don't want to train him because he might help somebody else out in the industry. Who might be my competitor, that's really short-sighted.
Unfortunately, it exists. Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Well, let's talk something a little bit more positive. I think a lot of the gains that we make in this field tend to be one person at a time. And I wonder if you could share a story or two about some of your students that have been successes that you remember.
Yeah, so I always say that the greatest part of being an educator is when you come upon your students years later, and you see what they've accomplished. And so I had one young man went out, he worked in a shop, worked his way up, and I hadn't heard from him in probably 10, 12 years. And all of a sudden he calls me and he says, hey, I'm looking for somebody. I'm now in running a shop. He's employed by somebody, but he says I'm in charge of the shop, and I'm in charge of hiring. Do you have any students? And so seeing that student go full circle, come through the ranks, and now be in management was definitely something. I told my students last week. I've seen the whole gamut. With over 400 students, I've seen my students basically come in, and our average age at the college is 26. So we have an interesting mix. We have about a third out of high school. We have a third that are kicking around in their 20s, have had some life experience. And then we have vocational retrainees that'll go into their 50s. I think the oldest student I ever had was 62. So it's an interesting mix. I've seen students, get married, have kids. Unfortunately, I've seen a few pass away. But it's definitely when you see them leave, particularly my 18-year-olds who come in with a lot of unfocused energy. And if you could just channel that energy, but I've seen a lot of them go out and mature and, come back 5, 10 years later as totally different individuals. And, you do have an effect on people. And, I had a retirement party last Thursday and I had about 50 people turn up. Mostly past students, and how grateful it is to see that you had an effect on their life, and some great comments from students.
Well, your replacement at the school, isn't she one who went through the program herself?
Yeah, actually our whole team there are all program members. So we have 2 full-time faculty. So Lizzie Conley was my student in 2017, and she's had some very interesting life experiences, got some great skills. She's going to do a great job leading the program. Zach DeWord, who's essentially replaced me in my teaching role, is a graduate of the program, and then we have some lab assistants as well that are all graduates of the program. So yeah, that's very fulfilling. I think one of the proudest things I am is leaving it in good shape. Having had the opportunity to kind of shape the team that is taking over, and knowing that not only will they do great things, but they will improve. And I said, I'm going to be back. I can't leave this baby, walk away completely. As a matter of fact, when I turned in my keys on Friday, that was a very emotional day. It hit me harder than I thought. But I intend to sponsor a student, and I intend to come back, at least once a semester and check up on things. And as I tell Lizzie, I don't want to see it the same. I want to see it improved. I'm a big believer in lean, and we're constantly looking for improvements. And I know that the program's in good shape.
That's great. How important do you think is a strong, enthusiastic teacher to the success of these woodworking programs?
Oh God, that's huge. That is huge. I mean, they're the drivers, and they need the support. Like I said, they need the support from industry, but it really starts with the individual. And I've seen programs where an individual has left, and that program has just kind of faded. And so, without somebody that truly is passionate and inspires the students, networks with industry, keeps current, programs will fade. So that's critical. That said, those individuals need to network. And that's why the trade shows are so important. That's why the WCA is so important, because it provides that network to share ideas and improve.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I always figure that the teachers need to be champions and advocates for all this. And I think of all those stories I've heard of the years of kids who their whole career began with a shop teacher or something like that. And I know successful business people that have hired their old shop teachers.
I've already entertained a few offers from the companies who would like my services, and at this point, I'm not looking for more work. I have no problem keeping busy, but it is nice to hear that.
Well, I don't think we're going to solve all the woodworking career education problems today. So let's talk about the road ahead for you. What's retirement look like for you? What are you going to do?
Well, I will. Like I said, I have no problem keeping busy. In preparation for retirement, I knew I needed to get involved in a few things, and so one of the things I took on is a director position for the Seth Peterson Cottage, and that is a Frank Lloyd Wright cottage home on Mirror Lake State Park, which is up in Wisconsin Dells, about 60 miles from Madison. So I'm on the board of directors. I help shape policy. We do a work week where we go out and we keep that cottage up to shape. So being the cabinet maker, of course, I've already got a list of projects, furniture to build and woodwork to fix and whatnot. So I'll be doing that. Travel has always been a big part of our lives, and so I anticipate probably 4 to 6 months a year being on the road.
Wow.
I've got a trip planned leaving in January to South America and Antarctica with my 2 sons.
Oh, that's exciting.
And as you know, my oldest son and I are big hikers. We hiked up in your area. Actually, I hiked about 1,300 miles of the Appalachian Trail in 2016. Summited Katahdin. So we were up in Maine by you. And, we've got plans. He and I will be going to Nepal to do Everest Base Camp come November of next year. And as long as my body holds up, there's a lot of other areas I want to travel to.
That's exciting. Wow. And you're not entirely leaving the shop. You showed me some pictures of a fabulous Maloof style rocker you've been making. You have other furniture projects that are in mind?
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks. That was a great project. I've always admired Maloof, and someday I hope to have a grandchild or two to rock in that rocking chair. But yeah, I have a shop at home. I'll keep plenty busy in that shop. I want to go back to my roots, which is hand tools. My formal training as a woodworker is in boat building, from the Northwest School of Wood and Boat Building out in Washington State. And so, now that I don't have to watch the clock and I can take however long I need to, I'm going to spend more time with hand tools. So my first project is actually a bunch of dipples, which, if you don't know what a dipple is, I have a friend who's a gardener, and they use these to plant.
Yeah, for
So it's
seed planting. It's a little thing to
exactly, yeah.
poke a hole in
So
the ground.
yeah, so she's been on my list for a while. Can you make me a dozen dipples? So I'll be later today. I'll be out working on the lathe, making dipples.
Well, that's great. Well, I just want to thank you for everything you've done for the woodworking industry and for the students that you've taught who have founded successful careers. And I wish you the best of luck in all of your new adventures.
Thanks, Will, and thank you for everything you do. I mean, you've really developed a community, and through your podcast, through your reporting, and all your experience in the industry. And we go back many years. I've always admired what you've done. So, coming from you, I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I'm sure we'll cross paths in the future at some point, and keep us posted of all your activities.
Absolutely, will do.
Thanks a lot, Patrick. We'll talk to you later. That's it for today. If you're looking for more of our podcasts, you can find all of them at woodworkingnetwork.com/podcasts and in popular podcast channels. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks again to today's sponsor, FDMC Magazine. If you have a comment or a topic you'd like us to explore, contact me at will.sampson@woodworkingnetwork.com. Thanks for listening.